Shashi Tharoor, a year on the Modi government, which is lauded all around the world at the moment, they have made a very bold claim, which is that they have banished the word corruption from the political lexicon in India. That sounds to me ludicrous.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, the thing is that they are basically alleging that there are no quote-unquote scam headlines, as it were, as there were in the last few years of the UPA government. Though what they're overlooking is the fact that actually these were not scandals or corruption controversies that occurred during the second term of the UPA, but actually were earlier episodes which were then the object of the Controller and Auditor General's strictures. And those reports were what got all the attention. So that's what this particular claim is all about. But as an Indian, obviously, I want there to be no corruption in my country. So if that's going to be a laudable objective, I hope they stick to it.
Has Modi been good for that? Has he cleaned up politics?
I think it's too early to say because, first of all, as I said, there was no corruption in the last few years of the UPA. There were reports about previous corruption. And therefore, one can argue that he simply continued a tradition of non-corrupt governance at the top.
But a lot of corruption, that's a big claim.
At the top, right. There is a lot of corruption that daily affects the lives of ordinary Indians. And, you know, the sad thing is we tend to focus on these big headline issues, the big scandals on defense procurement and things like that. Whereas, in fact, what really affects the vast majority of Indians is when they lose a parent and can't get a death certificate without greasing a palm, or when a pregnant labouring class woman goes to a government hospital where she's entitled to a bed, but has to deliver on the floor unless she can bribe an orderly. I mean, these are the kinds of episodes, or an old widow can't get her husband's pension processed until she pays off a clerk. I mean, day after day, these are the kinds of things, and I'm not sure that Mr. Modi can claim any credit for having stopped that just yet.
Do you feel your side, Congress, has got its head at all around why you were swept out of government the way you were?
Oh, yes. No, I think the reasons for it are very clear. We had a perfect storm of negative factors. We had massive fuel price inflation because when the UPA first came to power, oil was $40 a barrel and the dollar was 40 rupees. By the time we ended our 10 years in power, we had oil at $140 a barrel and the dollar was 60 rupees. So every dollar it went up was costing the Indian taxpayer more, and eventually that had to be passed on to the consumer, and the consumer voted against having to pay more at the pump. That was one major factor. Secondly, food price inflation, partly because of the fuel costs going up, partly because of our own efforts to improve purchasing power strength amongst the poor in rural villages of India. Third, local political factors, no question about it. This whole business of Andhra Pradesh, for example. You take a tough decision to give in, to concede the demand for two separate states out of Andhra, but then the newly created state is won by the party that led the separatist agitation, and the older state turns against you for breaking them up. So you lose. We went from 33 seats in Andhra Pradesh to 2. As a result of that. Then there was the corruption thing. We were tarnished by the association with corruption because we happened to be in power when it happened. And finally, there was anti-incumbency, which is the classic Indian phenomenon. Voters tend to go to the polls in a mood to throw the rascals out, as it were. The re-election rate in the Lok Sabha since the last 5 or 6 elections has been 26%. So actually getting re-elected is the exception, not the norm.
What about the whole question of modernity, though? I mean, Modi promised reform, services that would deliver basic services that people have been denied by your government for so long, and your party seems still in awe of the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty, trapped by it, trapped in the past.
No, but I mean, first of all, Mr. Modi's claims of being the man who delivers development, frankly, he reminds me of that wonderful old Texan expression, all hat and no cattle. You know, he's very good he talks a good game, he's good at the sound bites, at the speeches, the photo ops, the television appearances, but we're yet to see any results on the ground. And all this fine vision and these tall claims, everything from the Clean India campaign to the Clean Ganga River campaign to the Model Village campaign, none of these have a single credible budget attached to them. Or if they do, the budget is smaller than the UPA government had for the equivalent program. There is no implementation plan of action. There is no executing capacity. There's nobody tasked with implementing it. It remains a soundbite. It looks good on TV, and then he moves on.
So the world's
That's
being
not results.
fooled.
Well, it's too early to tell is the usual answer. It's only been 1 year. But in this 1 year, we've certainly not seen any results on the ground. And that's our big frustration with Mr. Modi and his government.
I mean, there are also alarming elements of the stifling of dissent, though, about the Modi government as well, the way they have cracked down on Greenpeace, for example?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about a country like India is that even if the government cracks down on Greenpeace, the media is there, NGOs are there, social media is there, civil society is there. So Greenpeace gets enough of a platform to lay its message out. However, the government has stifled its funding, restricted its movements, made life difficult for it. Governments can do that. They can make life difficult for you. But in a democracy, they can't shut you down. Well, I do believe that they should have done what we'd done and let all sorts of voices, including voices critical of the Indian government and its policies, flourish. That's what democracy is all about. There is a strain of intolerance in the Modi government that is unwelcome and unwise, in my view. And it's not just Greenpeace. They put the Ford Foundation on a watch list, for God's sake. Seems absurd.
Is he an Indian Putin?
Well, look, I mean, frankly, the systems are very different. We are a thriving democracy. He doesn't have the kind of crushing parliamentary majorities in both houses that Mr. Putin has. He has one in the lower house. He doesn't have it in the upper house. He also has, in many ways, to contend with a very, very vibrant civil society, social media outlets, free press, and so on, which I think will act as a curb on any excessive tendency towards intolerance. But that said, running a government is a very powerful position to be in, and you can misuse it. And it's our job as the opposition and as the members of the Indian public to ensure that he is not given enough opportunities to succumb to temptation and misuse that power. I would not say yet that he has misused it. He's condoned a lot of excesses. He's allowed some of his ministers and some of his MPs to say the most outrageous things against minorities, for example, which are simply, they go against the grain of everything we stand for as a pluralist democracy. But it's far too early to suggest that he's becoming anything remotely like a dictator. He can't be.
You've touched on corruption in Indian politics. I mean, the other organisation with which you're associated is the UN, of course. And I wonder, looking on the FIFA scandal over the last few days, whether you think there are any possible lessons for the UN, which is also often accused of great corruption and great political fixes.
Not that way. No, surely not. Because, I mean, first of all, the UN doesn't give anything that requires $100 million bribes, I assure you. I mean, the kind of corruption scandals that have come to hit the UN have usually involved procurement-related things, supplies, goods, people raking some percentage off. But these are, by comparison with the numbers we've heard bandied about at FIFA, these are relatively small things. The main difference with the UN and FIFA is, of course, that the UN is a more pluralist organization in the sense that you are accountable to 193 governments. The Secretary General doesn't have the kind of authority over the UN that Mr. Blatter seems to have had over FIFA. FIFA, once the governments have anointed you, you seem to have a completely free hand. At the UN, it doesn't work that way. The governments remain very much in control. The Security Council's meeting regularly, the General Assembly's meeting regularly, there are various committees. There are tremendous numbers of checks and balances. And as somebody who's been a senior administrator of the UN, I can assure you there is no comparison whatsoever between the UN's experience and what we're reading about anyway, FIFA's experience.
You talked about the freedom of the press. Now, you've had yourself a very bruising relationship with the press recently over what must have been a tremendously painful period of your life. I know you recently talked about certain journalists as scum and liars, and I just wonder, how do you feel you have been treated over the last few months, both by the press and by the Indian police?
Well, look, I mean, as far as the investigation into my late wife's tragic demise is concerned, I can't speak about it. It's still ongoing. But it certainly seems to have been a very prolonged process involving multiple checks of her viscera and so on and so forth until they get something other than the answer that points to the fact there was nothing. None of the alleged poison has been found in 2 successive forensic tests. And now there's a 3rd one being conducted at the FBI. And meanwhile, lie detector tests, all sorts of things. It's a very prolonged, but of course, very thorough process. And at the end of it all, we'll see what conclusion they come up with. But as far as the media is concerned, there's been a disgraceful lack of professionalism in the Indian media. There's been a rush to judgment that's disgraceful. I mean, I have found self-righteous channel anchors who have decided that they are witness, prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner all in one, and have repeatedly played all these roles in successive lurid voyeuristic discussions of my life and my wife's passing in ways that are truly, truly contemptible. And some of this has washed over into the print media as well, because there's this race to the bottom to compete with each other in the avid quest for TRPs, as we call the ratings on TV, and for more eyeballs when it comes to newspapers. So it's been sad. I am a great advocate of freedom of the press. I'm proud of the lifelong role I've played as an articulator and defender of freedom of the press, including at the United Nations, where I was Under Secretary General for Public Information and Communications. My keynote speech at the World Summit on the Information Society is often talked about, even today, 10 years later, as an example of a UN official being willing to push the envelope in favor of press freedom. And so what I'm saying is not that there should be restrictions or censorship or anything. There should simply be better journalism, more professional journalism. The kinds of things the Americans call journalism 101, where you don't mix up gossip and hearsay with reportage, that you don't mix up opinion and commentary with fact, that all of these basic rules, which are being so blithely ignored in India, should be respected. Then I think India, the Indian public and Indian democracy will be better served.
Do you trust the police? I mean, when I go to India and deal with often victims of crime, they often tell me the police are corrupt, they don't trust the police, they don't feel the system is on their side. I just wonder, are you beginning to sympathise with that view?
Well, look, I mean, the fact is that I've not accused anyone amongst the authorities of any sort of wrongdoing, nor am I proposing to do so, Krish. As far as I'm concerned, there is a process going on. It may be inconvenient, often painful, and certainly prolonged, but I have to wait.
It's very late as well.
I have to wait for the outcome of it. When we see the results of all their labours, we'll be able to judge if it was professionally conducted or not.
The most recent part of this, aspect of this, has been this whole question of the suspects being requested for lie detector tests. And there's been some talk of you as well.
I volunteered.
Would you be happy to do that?
I volunteered for one 6 months ago. I mean, there's nothing we've got to hide, either me or those associated with me. And certainly, if this is not admissible in court, so it's merely to satisfy the police's curiosity. But if they want to do it, we've offered total cooperation. I've handed over all my emails for the last 7 years to them, and they can trawl and fish as much as they like. They can use whatever sophisticated software. I don't delete my emails, so everything is there. I have absolutely nothing to hide. I just want this process to be done with the maximum possible cooperation from all concerned, so we get a fair result.
Do you know how this latest question of the post-mortem got into the press? I mean, has this been leaked? Or?
There have been some disgraceful leaks, including even of the post-mortem video, something which the family has not been shown. There's been a lot
That must have been incredibly distressing for you.
Very, very distressing. There's been a lot of malice and nastiness and a total lack of standards on the part of those receiving it. I mean, a self-respecting journalist receiving these things, instead of rushing to print it, quote it, carry stills from it, or put it on TV, ought to be saying to the person leaking this, what kind of person are you? You're supposed to be a doctor who's got custody of this material. You presume to leak it to me, the press. What public interest is served by this kind of voyeurism?
And you deny that absolutely, that there was any pressure or anything like that on this doctor who's been talking?
Of course. I've never seen him, spoken to him in my life, and nor has anybody else I know done so. The whole thing is ridiculous. But all of this, again, the Indian media never seems to question, never seems to look at the timeline, never seems to check.
So finally, politically, what are your ambitions now?
Well, look, I'm a member of the opposition, a party which is on the path to revival. I am the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, which in our parliament is a very exciting place to be, particularly since it covers both houses of parliament. So I have members from both houses in my committee. And I continue to serve the people of Thiruvananthapuram, who've entrusted me with their mandate for another 4 years to go. Beyond that, we'll see.
Shashi Tharoor, thank you very much.